For my fifth Sustainable Development Goal, I selected Goal 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Let's get into it with what is climate change. Climate change is the long-term change in temperature and weather patterns that are being caused in large parts by human activity. The primary activity in question is the release of carbon dioxide through the burning of fossil fuels and the destruction of natural carbon dioxide sinks. We're not talking about short-term patterns we see in weather, but rather the slow and subtle shifts that are creating trends in our climate, which is felt as warmer temperatures and more dramatic and frequent weather events, hurricanes, storms, tornadoes, etc. So, what causes climate change? Greenhouse gases trap heat in our atmosphere. They're released through a variety of industries, including energy generation, transportation, and agriculture. These gases create a greenhouse effect by trapping heat and increasing temperature, which means more energy for storms in our atmosphere. So, what does the data say? First, we can see that energy coming from the burning of fossil fuels is responsible for nearly 3/4 of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Agriculture makes up the next major chunk, followed by industry, and finally waste management. Next, we can see how this trend has been reinforced by growth of outputs in key groups, electricity, heat, transportation, and manufacturing, while other sectors have remained constant or increased slowly. This chart can show us what nations are emitting greenhouse gases. China is leaping ahead of other nations in emissions and has continued this trend, while other nations have gradually increased, like India, or stabilized, such as the US and Canada. Now, let's discuss what nations have set a target of net zero emissions. Canada has one in place in law. The US has a pledge to achieve it. China, one of the worst offenders, and India, one of the worst increasers, both have have it in a policy document. But few nations outside of Europe and Canada have put anything into law. So what does the data say? What this means is we're not making progress on this goal. Pledges and policy documents are simply symbolic gestures. The reality is that developed nations are creating massive levels of pollution that will disproportionately impact the developing world and create a vicious circle that makes it more difficult for these nations to adapt to changing climates without the resources they need. Immediate, tangible action is needed, not just pledges. So what can we do about climate change? Well, the reality is it's hard for most people to do anything about climate change, but there are some steps we can take. First, we can reduce energy use. Without a market, energy generation will decrease. Next, we can vote with how we spend money. Purchase products that have created climate pledges and are working to produce their products with zero emissions. Using and encouraging more efficient means of transportation, such as bikes and walking, that require little or no energy generation from outside of our own bodies. Finally, vote for officials that take climate change seriously and understand the causes of climate change. So, how can global information systems help combat climate change? Here are a few ways. 3D printing can create products locally, reducing the need for transportation of goods. 5G can reduce the equipment needed for network infrastructure. Drones can create energy-efficient means of completing final mile deliveries. AI smart homes can reduce the energy requirements for heating and cooling of homes. Big data can help identify means of creating more energy-efficient delivery of energy. And the Internet of Things allows smart devices to make decisions about how to use energy in the most efficient means possible. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Hope you learned a little bit about Sustainable Development Goal number 13, combating climate change. And I'd love it if you left a comment below. Thank you.